experts anticipate a shift towards tighter monetary policies to combat inflation and stabilize the naira. All eyes are on the ongoing Monetary Policy Committee meeting under the leadership of Dr. Yemi Cardoso, with expectations running high for potential adjustment to the benchmark interest rate, known as the monetary policy rate. Speculations abound regarding the extent of tightening necessary to address prevailing economic challenges. Specifically, against the backdrop of rising inflation and currency depreciation, the decision makers, the MPC, are tasked with charting a course that balances price stability with sustainable growth. Well, that's it. So to discuss this, I'm joined by the group CEO, Carry Asset Limited, Mr. Johnson Chukwu. He joins me virtually now. Thank you, Mr. Chukwu, for your time. Well, it's good to see you again. This meeting is expected to set the tone for future policy directions and market sentiment, being the first MPC meeting under Mr. Cardoso. What are the key expectations and concerns regarding the MPC meeting and its potential outcomes? Let's start from there.
Okay, thank you, Frank, for having me. I'll start with the key expectations. One of the key expectations is that the Monetary Policy Committee, as currently reconstituted, will move the monetary policy rate, will tighten at the meeting holding today and tomorrow. And why do we expect that they will tighten? We expect them that they will increase the monetary policy rate beyond the 18.75%. And bear in mind that every decision taken by the monetary authorities in the past few weeks indicates a very strong tendency towards tightening. We've seen the central bank and debt management office withdraw about 6.6 trillion from the economy in the past 3 or 4 weeks. And we've also seen the central bank issue treasury bills, the 364-day treasury bills, at 19% with effective yield of more than 20%. So clearly, those are indications of the thought process or the policy orientation of the monetary authorities. And as it stands today, it would not make sense for them to keep rates, MPR, at 18%, 5%, when even treasury bills is trading about 19%. So I think clearly we should expect a material increase in monetary policy rate. What are the underlying currents? One, we've seen an inflation rate at 29.9% to a 28-year high, which clearly calls for a need to apply some policies to moderate inflation. Of course, we have always said that inflationary pressure today is not largely driven by excess liquidity. Of course, there is a liquidity suffix as a result of injection of liquidity to the economy from the ways and means funding of the federal government. But the other factors that are actually driving up inflation: food production, pass-through effect of exchange rate depreciation. The other factor that makes it compelling, or that may inform the decision of the Monetary Policy Committee to tighten, is the pressures on foreign exchange. We've seen naira touch more than 1,900 naira to dollar a couple of days back, although it has clawed back about 1,600 or thereabouts. So these are two factors that will likely propel the decision of the Monetary Policy Committee. On the converse, we're also dealing with an economy that grew at 3.46% in the last quarter of last year and about 2.74% in the full year 2023, which also indicates that even with a moderate tightening, in as much as that could lead to a slowdown in economic growth, but it may not tip the economy into a recession, because the growth of 3.46% was one of the best we saw in the past few quarters. So those are factors that will basically inform the decision the Monetary Policy Committee will take today and tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Specifically your expectation is that we're likely to see a review, an upward review in the MPR, isn't it?
Absolutely. I expect that we should see an increase in monetary policy rate by at least a minimum of 100 basis points. But I suspect they could actually increase above by more than 100 basis points.
Mm. Should that happen, what implication would that have on investor confidence, activities in the market, in the stock market, in the fixed income market, and all of that? I think you need to give us an understanding of what may happen going forward. Should that happen?
If you look at what I said earlier, what I actually said is that the interest rate environment has completely overtaken the current monetary policy rate, which was last adjusted in July last year. Like I did mention earlier, the Treasury bills rate, the 364 days bills is trading at yield. I mean, at the primary market of more than 19%, effective yield of more than 20%. We've seen even the 182-day bills 2 weeks ago was sold at 18%. And then the one of last week was also sold around 17.5%. So we are dealing with a market yield environment that has made the current monetary policy rate no longer relevant. So it has to be adjusted to be reflective of the current interest rate environment. Secondly, a lot of banks are going to the standing lending facility of the central bank to borrow. And they are borrowing at MPR plus 5%. I think plus 5%. So if MPR is increased, then that will make it more punitive for the banks to come and borrow. And therefore, we discourage further credit creation, particularly for banks that don't have strong liquidity. So that's another factor you have to look at, that the MPR has to be adjusted to remain the anchor rate in the economy. As it stands today, it had been made obsolete by the decisions earlier taken by the central bank and the general macroeconomic environment related to interest rate. So what will be the impact on equity market, a fixed income market? Ideally, when you have a material increase in fixed income rate, portfolio investors will underweight, adjust their portfolios and underweight them in equities and overweight them in fixed income instruments. So we should expect that as this trend continues, that there will be some sell down in equities. Of course, we've seen some level of moderation in equity market gains in the past few weeks, obviously in response to the sharp increase in interest rates at the T-bills market. So, and then we should also expect that investors will rather put their money into the fixed income space, which is why I said earlier that in the past 4 weeks or thereabout, the monetary authorities and the debt management officers sucked out, withdrawn about 6.6 trillion naira, which means investors are really scrambling. If you look at what happened last week, total treasury sales was more than about 1.45 trillion naira in a single week. And a fortnight earlier, about 1 trillion naira was sold in the T-bills, in the money market, in the short end of the money market, or the short end of the money market, that's the treasury-based market. So these are indications of where investors are putting their money. As it relates to possibility of equity price adjustment, material equity price adjustment, which I've actually feared, that may be delayed until we begin to see publications of full-year results of quoted companies, because a huge portion of the investment now in the market is held by institutional investors like the PFS, who will tell you they are there for the long haul. But I think as we move towards a high-yield fixed income environment, then ultimately the portfolio investors like the PFAs will also have no choice than to adjust their portfolios in favor of fixed income instruments.
Interesting insights there. Some have called for the need to strike a balance between stimulating economic growth and managing inflation as it were. In addition to monetary policy, what fiscal measures do you believe are crucial to addressing Nigeria's macroeconomic challenges at this time?
Well, Frank, the most important fiscal measure that will contribute to addressing Nigeria's current macroeconomic environment is improved food production. And to improve food production, we have to deal with the issue of insecurity in the major food base of the country, as well as insecurity in the oil-bearing communities. Those are the two most critical actions that the fiscal authority can take. Because if you have increased food production, food prices will come down. That because food components account for more than 60% of the basket of consumer price index. And if you have a food inflation about 35% in January, and you can bring it down to maybe sub 10%, you can imagine the impact on overall inflation, all item inflation. And then if you have improved food production, you're going to see improvement in foreign exchange earnings, improvement in foreign reserves, stabilization of exchange rate, and possibly appreciation of the naira, which will reduce the pass-through effect of naira depreciation on commodity on prices. So those are the two major things that the fiscal authority have to do. The third factor is to moderate or possibly eliminate borrowing by ways and means, which is injecting liquidity into the economy that is not backed by productive activities. And then the fourth element is to reduce the amount of foreign exchange, crude oil sales price that they shared to the treaty agreement and the higher exchange rate. Of course, we're dealing with the exchange rate about 1,400, 1,500 today, even if you use the I&E window rate. And if you convert whatever is earned from crude oil sales, which for me is similar to economic rent, it leads to injection of liquidity that is not bad but productive activities. And that liquidity eventually finds itself into the market and propel higher supply of money without commensurate increase in goods and services. So those are the factors that I think the fiscal authorities can deal with. I can wait further on that as we progress in this conversation.
I mean, in recent time, we've seen the presidency gave a directive, to release grain from the National Reserve. So it's expected that that directive, when implemented, should perhaps drive down the cost of, food prices in the market. Also, we've seen on the monetary side, we've seen the CBN clamp down on BDCs as well. Recently, they also issued a directive. So if you put all of this together, how soon are we close to, bringing all of these heat down with regards to the cost of living, the high cost of living, the prices of food items, and of course the inflation that is also biting hard vis-a-vis the exchange rate volatility as well?
Okay, in the first place, bear in mind that we do not have so much food in the silos. We don't have so much food reserve in the country. That is, some states have actually said they have nothing in the silos in their states. So the amount of food that will be released from the reserves or the silos is minimal, and we have very little effect on food supply. But most importantly, food is what is consumed daily. Whatever you have in your strategic reserve will not satisfy a daily consumption, because food consumption is like a flow, and a one-off supply or release of strategic reserve of grain will hardly scratch this, will not move the needle. What matters is that we restore food production, and then the challenge we are going to have will be for the season. But if we do not restore food production, it's difficult for you to satisfy the demands for food based on what you have in your strategic reserve. And again, the government does not have so much war chest, so much of income as to import food on a consistent basis to meet the demand of a 220 million population. So I think that will be a stopgap, temporary palliative, like applying pain relief to a chronic dislocation, fracture. You only have a relief, and then once it wears out, the pain will come back until you do the necessary operation, which is what we need to do to improve food production. Then the second aspect of your question as it relates to the impacts of this current pursuit of BDCs by law enforcement agencies. I think it is wrong-headed. It doesn't solve any problem. The BDCs are not market makers in foreign exchange. Neither do they generate the demand, nor they generate the supply. So they are just a market where a person who needs something comes and a person who is selling something will come to, because both of them know if you go there, you sell, if you go there, you buy. So pursuing them around does not address the issue of demand and supply, does not address the issue of the fact that supply is far below demand. I think what we should do is focus on the critical issues of improving supply. Demand management, which is what they have been doing, does not have enduring impact if you do not improve supply, because there's a limit to what say you can constrain demand, particularly if a country with this population. But in terms of disrupting the market or market space, it doesn't address the fact that I need to come to London, I need to buy FX, so I need to pay for my hotel accommodation, I need to pay for taxes or trains movement around if I'm in the outside country. And then I'm coming back, I live in London, I'm coming back to Nigeria and I have £1,000, I need to change it, I need to go somewhere and get naira. It doesn't address that. And that's what basically the role the BDCs are there to address. But I think the central bank has also realized that, and they are trying to formalize the BDCs and make them integral, or they saw them as integral part of the financial system. Certainly, you need a market for those who demand the product and those who supply the product.
I'm going to let you go in, in a few minutes, Mr. Chukwu. Let's talk about back to Dr. Cardoso at the helm of affairs, renowned for his astute insight in banking and strategies. What structural reforms or policy changes would you recommend for ensuring a long-term economic resilience in the country? I think we need to look at that before I let you go.
Well, I had mentioned that I think the CBN Governor Cardoso has also said that one is that he's eliminating ways and means funding of the federal government, so that we will eliminate that source of capital injection or liquidity injection into the economy that is not backed by productivities, and that we are going to adhere strictly to the Fiscal Responsibility Act as well as the CBN relates to funding of the federal government. The second aspect that we have to deal with is as it relates to the amount. He had not mentioned that the conversion of proceeds of oil sales into the federation account at higher exchange rate. There's nothing wrong with converting at current higher exchange rate, but the issue is that we should go back and redefine or tighten our Fiscal Responsibility Act and ensure that any proceeds from sale of oil that is shared to the state government and the federal government will only be devoted to capital infrastructure, such that that injection is backed by productive activities, is supported by productive activities, instead of just sharing and then you see liquidity come into the economy and without supporting productive activities, because we don't really spend money on producing crude. So it's like economic rent, and it has impact on the liquidity suffix. These are the minima and a few other things in terms of eliminating or reducing development finance initiative with the central bank said it will do. Of course, that's part of the ambition to come liquidity into the economy. But sometimes, at some point, we need some intervention in some specific sectors of the economy. Probably what we need to do is activate those special arms of government agencies like the mortgage refinancing company to provide mortgages instead of the central bank providing that. Bank of Industry to provide loans to the manufacturing sector instead of central bank providing that. Bank of Agriculture providing loans to the agricultural sector instead of the central bank providing that, so that the specialized financial institutions set up to do these jobs are enabled to carry them out instead of central bank playing the mini boss role that we've seen the Central Bank of Nigeria do in the past couple of years.
A good place to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time. Group CEO, Carry Asset Limited, Mr. Johnson Chukwu. Thank you for coming on Business Nigeria. Do have a great day.